Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ben here. Today I'm back again with another video. The subject of today's video is going to be talking about the Philadelphia 76ers, and I'm actually sort of going back to an informal series I had been doing for a while, which was sort of like breaking down a team's uh, stretch of success in their history and like basically explaining why things happened the way they did and how it was maybe sort of unique circumstances and explaining those. So examples of this are like I broke down Washington's stretch of having Gilbert Arenas, Caron Butler, and Antoine Jamison, which is one of the best big threes in the NBA for a stretch of time for about 5 years, and they never even made out of the first round of the playoffs with that core. And then I also talked about the Vince Carter, Jason Kidd era and why they weren't super successful, but you would think that they were, especially if you include Richard Jefferson and Kenyon Martin and all that. I also broke down the New York Knicks during the Carmelo era and why they weren't as successful. Um, and then I also broke down, let's see here, what was another one I did? There was one other one I can't remember right now, but I think that it was, oh yeah, the Indiana Pacers and how they rose to success in the late 2000s and then into the 2010s. So if you're interested in this kind of video, go and check those ones out too, and you might enjoy them as well. So the subject of today's video is going to be on the Los Angeles Lakers and, or no, excuse me, what am I talking about? Philadelphia 76ers. I was looking at something that said Lakers on here, sorry. So it's on the Philadelphia 76ers between a stretch of 2006 to 2012. In those 6 seasons, this team made the playoffs 4 times, and out of those 4 times making the playoffs, only once did they have a winning record. So in a way, the 76ers built a like a perennial playoff contender from being 500 or below 500, which is really interesting. So the first season I'm actually going to cover, the 2006 to 7 season, is actually about a season before they really become this team, but I included it just because I think it's uh, part of how this team was formed. So 2006 to 7, Philadelphia had Mo Cheeks as their head coach. They were 35 and 47, and they were not in the playoffs. They were the 10th seed. I'll just kind of read off their core for each year just so you can get kind of an idea of the team. So for this team, the core was Andre Miller starting at point guard. He's who they had traded for Allen Iverson. Basically, I think it was in the middle of the previous season. They traded him for Iverson, or during this offseason right before. So he was kind of like the big get that they were supposed to receive out of that deal. Let's see here. As far as he was averaging 14 points a game and 7 assists. Then they had Willie Green at shooting guard, who was averaging 11 points a game. Andre Iguodala was at small forward, and he was the man on these teams. He was averaging 18 points a game, 6 assists, 6 rebounds. So people often nicknamed him like mini LeBron because he would put up those kind of like LeBron light type of numbers. At power forward on this team, you had a mix of Joe Smith, who was averaging 9 points and 7 rebounds a game, and then Stephen Hunter also starting somewhat, who was averaging 6 points and 5 rebounds. And then at center, you had Samuel Dalembert averaging 11 points and 9 rebounds a game. And then off the bench, your sixth man was Kyle Korver, averaging 14 points a game. This is actually the highest average of points per game Kyle Korver has ever had in a season, which is a fun fact. So this team was not very good. I think they just really lacked depth, especially if you look at power forward. Like they don't really have any, like Stephen Hunter's more of a center, but they were putting him there sometimes. Lou Amundsen isn't much of a player, but they had him playing a little bit. Joe Smith was like a shell of himself at this point, so they just really didn't have any solutions for power forward, and so this team was understandably pretty weak as far as depth, and so that's why they weren't that good. The next season, everyone improved and they kind of had some more cohesion as a team. They finished at 40 and 42. Again, Mo Cheeks was the head coach, and this time they actually got to the playoffs as the 7th seed, but they lost in the first round to the Detroit Pistons, which is understandable because Detroit was a really good team at this point. So if we look again at their core, it's a lot of the same guys. You've got Andre Miller starting, averaging 17 and 7. Andre Iguodala averaging 20 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists. Willie Green averaging 12 points a game at shooting guard. Samuel Dalembert at center averaging 11 points, 10 rebounds a night. And then at power forward, you have the emergence of Thad Young a bit more, who was averaging 8 points a game and 4 rebounds. And then they had lost Kyle Korver in the offseason. I think he went to the Jazz, but they did acquire um, Lou Amundsen, or excuse me, Lou Williams. And Lou Williams, he had been on the team previously, but he hadn't ever really played. But this year he actually started playing. He averaged 23 minutes a night and about 12 points a game. So he was doing pretty decent for this team on 42% shooting from the field. So this team had improved, I think, basically based on Iguodala improving and Andre Miller um, being more cohesive and having a better season, and then having an actual player to start at power forward and Thad Young. Oh, they also had Reggie Evans, who is averaging about 8 rebounds a game and not much for points. And if you don't know much about Reggie Evans, he's sort of he plays in the vein of somebody like Dennis Rodman in that he's all about rebounding and not about points. Next season, 2008 to 2009, they finished 41 and 41. Mo Cheeks was again the head coach, and they finished sixth in the East. And if we look down here, this season the big difference was that they had signed Elton Brand in the offseason to a big contract, 5 years, $79 million. That was big for the time. So their starting lineup was looking like Andre Miller, and then at the shooting guard you had Willie Green again. Andre Miller, excuse me, he averaged 16 points and 7 assists. Willie Green averaged only 9 points a game. Andre Iguodala still at the small forward, averaging 19 points, 6 rebounds, 5 assists. Power forward, you had Elton Brand, who actually only played about 30 games this year, but he was averaging 14 and 9. And then you had Samuel Dalembert averaging 6 points and 9 rebounds a night. And then again, you had Thad Young filling in at power forward when Brand was out, and he was averaging 15 points a night. So really coming into his own, also snagging 5 rebounds a night. And then you had Lou Williams, averaging 13 points off the bench as a sixth man. Again, not in that many minutes. He's only playing 23, 24 minutes a night and shooting 40% from the field. But again, yeah, so this team was a 6 seed at 500, so that's pretty crazy. They lost to the Magic in the first round, who would go on to get to the finals, but it was pretty understandable that they didn't get too far in the playoffs. They didn't have Elton Brand, and really, without arguably your second best player, you're going to struggle if you're already a 500 team. Next, we have the 2009 to 10 team. This team, it's hard to explain why they did or didn't do well. I think a big attribute was that they lost Andre Miller, who was a free agent at this point. I think he had played out the remainder of his contract with Philly, and so he was gone after this. So they had rookie Drew Holiday starting at point guard for most of the year, who didn't play terribly, but also struggled a bit, as most rookies do. But I'll read off they were actually only 27-55 this year, and they had Eddie Jordan as their head coach, who was only a guy there for 1 year, and sort of they knew that they were going to be kind of bad because they had lost Andre Miller and they were ushering in a rookie, so I think they knew that they'd be a bit worse. But I'll read off the stats of the people quick. Drew Holiday, starting point guard, averaging 8 points and 4 assists a game. Let's see here. They still had Willie Green. He was averaging 9 points a game. Andre Iguodala averaging 17, 7, and 6. Let's see here. You had Thad Young and Samuel Dalembert was the starting center at 8 points and 10 rebounds a night. Then you had Elton Brand, who played but missed some time too. He was 13 points and 6 rebounds a night at power forward. And that's sometimes at small forward, sometimes coming off the bench. You had Thad Young with 14 points a night, and then off the bench and doing some spot starting, you had Lou Williams with another 14 points a night. So again, a team that kind of played by committee, and Andre Iguodala was averaging his 17 to 19 points a night, but then you had a few other guys just averaging 14 and kind of filling in the spaces. So this team just wasn't that good, and that They lacked their borderline all-star starting point guard and Andre Miller, and they had a few injuries here and there. Like Lou Williams missed 18 games, Thad Young missed 15, Willie Green missed 9, Drew Holiday missed 9, Elton Brand missed 6. So those guys actually played quite a bit, but I think just with their two of their well, actually their second and third best scorer and Williams and Thad Young missed stretches of the season, and sometimes it's just hard to integrate everybody properly when you got guys constantly coming in and out of the lineup. So I think that attributes to why they didn't do that well this season. And then Andre Miller being gone, of course. The next season, 2010 to 2011, the 76ers had hired Doug Collins as their head coach. They finished 41 and 41, which was good for the 7th seed in the East. And let's see here. They had a few changes on the team. You had no more Samuel Dalembert. Let's see here. At starting point guard, you had Drew Holiday play 62 games. He averaged 14 points a night and 6 assists. Then you had at starting shooting guard Jody Meeks, who had been riding the bench for the past couple of years, but finally worked his way into the starting lineup. He averaged 10 points a night. Andre Iguodala missed 32 games, but he started at small forward again, averaging 14, 6, and 6. At power forward as a starter, you had Elton Brand again playing 60 games. He averaged 15 and 9, and then at starting center, you had Spencer Hawes replacing Samuel Dalembert. Spencer Hawes, let's see here. He missed 20 games and he averaged 7 points and 6 rebounds a night. And then as your bench guys, you had Evan Turner, who was the second overall pick. He was averaging 8 points a night on 43% shooting. And then Lou Williams and Thad Young again, who were each Lou Williams averaging 14 a night, Thad Young averaging 13 a night. So this team was another one where it was like it was good, but it was definitely by committee in that like their leading scorer averaged 15 points a night, and then I'll read off the following ones: 14, 14, 14, 13. So like you got a decent amount of guys scoring in double digits, but just not a ton of guys who you can just give the ball to and say create and get a ton of points for you. But again, they made the playoffs and lost in the first round for the third time in this video so far. The third time in 5 years. And now, lastly, is the lockout season of 2011 to 12, which again they were coached by Doug Collins, and their record was 35 and 31 in 66 games of play. So they actually had a better season than usual, being above 500 at least. And they finished 35 and 30. Oh, I said 35 and 31. They were the 8th seed in the playoffs, which is pretty decent. I mean, at least they got there based on that record, which, I don't know. I feel like the thing I'm noticing in this video is between a lot of these records, they don't really deserve to be in the playoffs just based on how they're doing. But hey, who am I to judge? Okay, so reading off some stats, you had basic same starting lineup except sub out like Willie Green for Evan Turner, who had started to go into the starting lineup, or Jody Meeks, excuse me. Jody Meeks was going back to the bench more, and Evan Turner was starting a little bit more, but Jody Meeks was still basically the starter, but they were splitting time essentially. So the core for this team is again Drew Holiday at point guard, who averaged 14 and 5. Andre Miller in his last year in Philly, averaging 12 points, 6 and 6. So he actually his lowest average for points in a while, but he was an all-star this year, I believe, which is kind of odd to me with that stat line, but oh well, there you go. Power forward, again, you had Elton Brand, who played actually a full healthy season. He averaged 11 points and 7 rebounds. Spencer Hawes at center, averaging 10 points and 7 rebounds. Okay, let's see here. And then off the sort of like off the bench sometimes, but sometimes starting, you had Evan Turner averaging 9 and 6. And then you had Lou Williams off the bench as the team's leading scorer, averaging 15 points a night. And then Thad Young also off the bench, averaging 13 points a night. So again, another group effort when you look at Lou Williams, 14 points tonight. Drew Holiday, 14. Thad Young, 13. Andre Iguodala, 12. Elton Brand, 11. Um, Evan Turner, 9. And Spencer Hawes, 10. Just a lot of, like, honestly, this is a team of, like, a bunch of role players who collectively just were just enough to get into the playoffs. This team actually had the most success of any of these teams during this stretch. They got to Game 7 in the second round of the playoffs versus the Celtics, and we're actually not that far off from getting to the conference finals as an 8 seed. Now, would they have gotten even to the second round if Derrick Rose would not have gone down injured in the first game of their series in the first round? So the answer is likely not. They probably wouldn't have gotten to the second round, but at the same time, it still is impressive. All right, so looking at this team over a 6-year stretch, their records read as follows: 35 and 47 in the first year, 40 and 42 in the next year, 41 and 41, 27 and 55, and then I think another 41 and 41. Yep, and then the last season 35 and 31, which, let's see here, over a 40 or over an 82 game stretch, which I want to calculate here real quick. Okay, so after calculating it, if you take that 35 and 31 record in their last year of that stretch, and then you uh, apply it to an 82 game regular season, they would be 43 and 39, which is actually like the same margin of wins. Um, but yeah, so this team over 6 years made the playoffs 4 times and only had a winning record in one of them, which was a lockout shortened season. And I think, just for reference, the next year Andre Iguodala left, and so I think that this team basically broke up at that point because they missed the playoffs again after that, and then they started tanking in the process thing. So this is like the last year of them being like a contender, so to speak. But I think this team making the playoffs really signifies that, like, if you've ever doubted the whole strength of the East versus strength of the West argument, this is perfect proof of it, because this team was a perennial playoff team, yet they were never even like 500 half of these years, which is really astounding. In that, like, some of their best years, they were coming in as like a 6 seed at 41 and 41. Um, so yeah, I think it just speaks to the strength of the West versus the East, or more, should I say, the weakness of the East, in that this team could be a perennial playoff contender, being a 500 or below team most of the time. It is cool though that, like, people really wrote off this team when AI left, and they were like, oh, they might as well just tank and stuff like that. But like, they actually were kind of resilient, and even getting to the Game 7 of the second round versus Boston in 2012 was really cool when it was happening, if you were watching it. And people were like, man, like, who knows how far they could go. I mean, probably only like the Eastern Conference Finals, but still, it was really cool. So that being said, I don't really have much else to say for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you found it informative. Hope you learned something. So yeah, the Philadelphia 76ers weren't necessarily screwed after AI left. They just were a much different team, composed of a lot of like role players who actually played super well to be able to excel and get their team to the playoffs. So again, hope you enjoyed it. Hope you found it interesting somewhat. And if you have anything to contribute, leave a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. Hope you have a good day. I'll see you next time. Bye.